What do you think of speedsters? They seem to be rather in fashion at the moment, and yet they divide opinion among car enthusiasts. Impractical, overly expensive, posers cars seem to be some of the things thrown at them by the naysayers. Yet, if you like something like an aerial Atom, for example, why wouldn't you like a stripped-back supercar like this? The brand new Aston Martin V12 Speedster. This has been about a year in the planning. It's been a collaboration between Q by Aston Martin and the design team over there. It takes inspiration from, well, originally I suppose 1953, the DB3S, then through to 1959 when they won Le Mans with the DBR1, and then through to the centenary concept. There was the CC100 which was shown in 2013 but never made it into production. And now there's this. And just sitting here, it feels really, I think, really cool to be in. No windscreen, fairly obviously no roof. We've got these double bubbles behind me. And then the interior, so we've got a lot of satin carbon fibre. And it does feel really light. I love this spine running down here. This is Skyfall silver, by the way. Over there on the passenger's side, you've got a sort of a leather bag instead of a glove box. And there's just a cover that will go over this car in case of rain when it's parked up. It's a mixture of kind of modern with that carbon fibre. We've got the sort of aluminium here and then the saddle leather here with sort of the red highlights. There's also something very cool about the design of this, in that they've done a particular design for this car, which customers can spec or not as they wish, which is sort of takes inspiration from the FA-18 Super Hornet, which was originally McDonnell Douglas and then it's now Boeing. And fortuitously perhaps is the plane that I think is going to feature largely in the upcoming Top Gun Maverick film. So that's pretty cool. All sorts of things going through my head now in terms of soundtracks. Anyway, let's get out and talk a bit about the mechanicals. Whilst we're here actually, just before I talk about the outside of the car, it's worth pointing out that the stickers on this show car, in the real thing, they'll be sort of inlaid underneath the lacquer, so that's just for this car. There's also some 3D printed rubber in there. Anyhow, let's talk about the chassis underneath this, because it's a blend of DBS Superleggera and Vantage. So it's the bonded aluminium construction that we're sort of used to with Aston Martin, but it is bespoke for this car. Now, talking of those two cars, the DBS and the Vantage, I think it's a sort of blend of those two cars down the front here as well. We've got the big grille, which we're used to from DBS, and then these lights are certainly very reminiscent of the current Vantage. Obviously different on this Speedster though is this intake here underneath the bonnet. What's underneath the bonnet? Well, it's the 5.2 litre twin turbocharged V12 which we've seen in the DBS Superleggera. Here it's putting out 690 brake horsepower and 555 pounds-foot of torque, which is slightly less than the DBS, but this also weighs less. This weighs around about 1,800 kilos, which is about 140 kilos less than the Volante version of the DBS, about 40 kilos less than the coupe version. As we move down here, wheels, well, we've got centre-lock forged alloy wheels, and behind those are carbon ceramic brakes as standard, as you would expect really, 410 millimeters in diameter on the front, 360 millimeters in diameter on the rear. Suspension, double wishbones at the front, multi-link setup at the rear, which seems to be the way Aston Martin's going at the moment, coil springs and adaptive dampers, and you've got Sport, Sport Plus and Track, which are all changed by the button on this familiar wheel in here. Let's just talk about the design sort of for a moment, because Speedsters can be a little awkward, because when you take away the windscreen, you end up with a lot of real estate here and very sort of flat expanse until you get to the bits back here. Obviously, because it's Q by Aston Martin, you could design something for yourself, and I think if I was buying one of these, I might sort of put perhaps some little aero screens just here, because it might sort of break it up a bit. Don't know. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. I love these coming out here for the wing mirrors. They look Very elegant indeed. Moving down, worth mentioning, I just noticed the big carbon paddles in there. We've got an 8-speed ZF automatic gearbox in there, which is probably what you'd expect. Limited slip diff in the rear. The back is very distinctive. Again, we can see elements of Vantage, certainly in the light bar at the back, which I suppose also links to DBX because that takes inspiration from the Vantage as well. And then down at the bottom there, we have a bespoke stainless steel exhaust system, just so you get all of the wonderful sound from that V12, which is what this car is all about. Talking the double bubbles back here as well, how are you going to keep the flies out of your teeth as you're going along? Well, there is storage for a couple of crash helmets under here, which you can see underneath the glass there, and you can fit a bit of other luggage in there as well, so you can go on a nice long journey, as long as it's somewhere nice and hot and sunny. The price for all this is £765,000, which is an awful lot of money, and certainly sort of for the naysayers that say, oh, they're too expensive, that might seem like, well, it is too expensive, but let's just compare it to a couple of the other speedsters out there, the cars that if you were dreaming up your triple test for 2021 when deliveries for this will start, which must be the McLaren Elva and of course the Ferrari Monza SP1 or SP2, depending whether you have 1 or 2 seats. And those cars are considerably more expensive. They both have around about 800 brake horsepower. They weigh, in the McLaren's case we're not quite sure yet, but sub 1200 kilos for that, around 1500 kilos for the Ferrari. So yes, on paper, fair enough, they might have a little more performance, although this is 0-62, 3.5 seconds, top speed 186 miles an hour, limited obviously because of the lack of windscreen. But those cars, well, you're looking at about twice the amount of money for the McLaren. It's £1,425,000, I think, for an Elva, and then for a Ferrari you're looking at 2.35 million. Yet they're producing 500 of the Ferrari and 399, if they can sell them all presumably, of the McLaren, and yet there will just be 88 of these. So this is the bargain, and yet also the rarest of that very small subset of cars, the supercar Speedster. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. I can see myself driving this, perhaps on the sort of the Targa Florio route or Mille Miglia route. Italy, hot, summer, V12, flies in your hair. Should be good.
Thank you very much for watching that. Please let us know what you think of the car in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell notification icon